I was halfway through loading the dishwasher when my life split cleanly into before and after. The phone buzzed on the counter beside the stack of chipped plates, screen lighting up with an unknown number. At first, I almost let it ring out. Spam calls had become as regular as the hum of the refrigerator, but something about the area code snagged my attention. It was the same hospital district where my husband worked. I swiped to answer, cradling the phone between shoulder and cheek while I rinsed the glass. "Hello. Is this Mrs. Hart?" The woman's voice on the other end was brisk, professional, threaded with a tension I recognized from every medical drama I'd ever watched. Only this wasn't television. This was my kitchen, my sink, my heartbeat suddenly pounding in my ears. "Yes, this is Emily. Who's calling?" "This is Nurse Daniels from St. Augustine Medical Center. I'm calling about your husband, Daniel Hart." The glass slipped in my soapy fingers. It hit the sink with a dull clink that sounded absurdly like the start of a countdown. "What happened? Is he okay?" "There's been a car accident," she said, and those 4 words rearranged the room around me. The overhead lights seemed harsher. The hum of the dishwasher too loud. "He's stable for the moment, but he sustained multiple injuries. We need you to come in as soon as possible." I gripped the edge of the counter with my free hand. "Multiple, what does that mean? Is he conscious?" He was conscious at the scene," she said. "He lost consciousness in transit, but he responded to initial interventions. The trauma team is with him now." The clinical language barely made it through the roar in my ears. "Daniel, car accident, trauma team. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, though I had no idea how far St. Augustine really was in traffic. I was already reaching for my keys on the hook beside the pantry. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Hart," the nurse added, her voice tightening in a way that made my stomach drop. "Your husband wasn't alone in the vehicle." I froze. "Okay," I said slowly. "Was someone else hurt?" "Yes," she replied. "We've admitted a second patient from the same accident." She identified herself as his partner. I must have misheard. "His what?" "His partner," the nurse repeated carefully, as if she were laying down a piece of evidence. "She was in the passenger seat. She requested that we notify you as well, since you're listed as next of kin." There was a beat of silence where I could hear only my own breathing. Too fast, too shallow. "I'm his wife," I said, the words scraping out of my throat like something unfamiliar. "I'm his only partner." On the other end, paper rustled. A keyboard clicked. "I understand. I'm just relaying what she told the admitting physician. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart. I know this is a lot at once. Can you get here safely?" Safely. It was a strange word, landing in the middle of the wreckage the call had just made of my reality. "Yes," I managed. "Text me the address." "I'm on my way." When the line went dead, the kitchen felt wrong. Too bright, too ordinary, as if it refused to acknowledge that, somewhere across town, metal had crumpled and glass had shattered and my husband had said the word partner about someone who wasn't me. I stood there for a full 30 seconds, my keys biting into my palm, before my body remembered how to move. I grabbed my coat, my bag, my phone charger like muscle memory, and headed for the door. On the hallway console, a framed wedding photo watched me go. Daniel and I beneath an arch of flowers, his dark hair slicked back, my veil pinned slightly crooked because we'd laughed too hard during the photos. We looked like a magazine spread for happiness. For certainty. "I'll be right back," I told the photo, which was ridiculous, but my brain had already slipped into that strange, dissociated place reserved for emergencies and nightmares. The drive to St. Augustine blurred into a series of fragments. The red of a traffic light bleeding into the darkness. The wail of a distant siren that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. The taste of metal in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue without noticing. I caught my reflection once in the rearview mirror as I braked too hard behind a slow-moving truck. My face was pale, eyes too wide. I didn't look like myself. I looked like someone about to hear something that would change her forever. Partner. The words slid around in my mind, refusing to settle into any shape that made sense. It wasn't that I believed our marriage was perfect. We fought about stupid things, the way he left coffee rings on the counter, how I stacked the dishwasher like a Jenga tower, the hours he kept at the architectural firm, my tendency to buy books we had no shelf space for. And the serious things, his mother's constant criticism, our stalled conversations about trying for a baby, the way my freelance graphic design work was always treated like a hobby next to his real job. But we were solid, I thought. Real. The kind of couple who weathered rough patches because beneath them there was bedrock. Then why had some woman in the passenger seat of his car, at the moment of impact, introduced herself as his partner? By the time the hospital came into view, a pale block of light against the darkening sky, my hands were trembling on the wheel. I parked crooked, my brain dimly registering the yellow lines I'd ignored, and half ran to the entrance. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and recycled air, sharp enough to cut through the cotton in my head. A TV in the corner of the waiting room flickered with muted news. A little boy with a Spider-Man backpack clutched his father's hand. Somewhere, a woman was crying, the sound thin and continuous like a kettle on the boil. I went straight to the reception desk. "My husband," I said, breathless. "Daniel Hart. He was just brought in. There was an accident." The receptionist looked up, took in my face, my shaking hands, and her expression softened in that practiced professional way. "Let me check, ma'am." She typed. "Scan the screen. He's in Trauma Bay 3. They're still working on him. You can't go back there yet." "I'm sorry." "Is he?" I swallowed. "Is he alive?" Her gaze flicked to the monitor again. A fraction of a second. A tiny frown line between her brows. "He's listed as critical but stable," she said. "The attending will come talk to you as soon as possible." Critical but stable. Words that meant nothing and everything. "And the other person?" I asked, the question forcing itself out before I could stop it. "The woman who was with him?" Something like recognition passed over the receptionist's face, quickly shuddered. "She's been admitted as well," she said. "She's in imaging right now." Imaging. So she was alive, too. Somewhere in this building, the woman who called herself my husband's partner was being slid into a machine that would take pictures of her bones while I tried to remember how to stand upright. "Mrs. Hart." I turned. A nurse in dark blue scrubs stood a few feet away, short blonde hair pinned back, glasses smudged at the edge. Her badge read Daniels. "I'm Nurse Daniels," she said. We spoke on the phone. Up close, I could see the fine creases at the corners of her eyes, the way her shoulders were set just a little too tight. She'd probably done this hundreds of times, delivered bad news to shell-shocked family members. But right now, she was the only solid thing in a world that had gone suddenly off balance. "Is he really stable?" I asked. The words came out more desperate than I intended. "For the moment, yes," she said. "He has a head injury, some internal bleeding we're monitoring, and a broken arm. They're working on controlling the bleeding now. The surgeon will discuss everything with you once he's out." My knees nearly buckled with a relief, so sharp it was almost pain. Head injury. Internal bleeding. Broken arm. Terrifying, but he was alive. Alive meant there was still something to hold on to. "And the other patient?" I asked, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "The one who said she was his partner?" The nurse hesitated. It was brief, but I saw it. "She's conscious," Daniel said finally. "Bruising, possible fractures, but she was talking when they took her to imaging. She asked if you'd been called." "Of course she did," I said before I could stop myself. Bitterness slipped out, raw and unfamiliar. She wanted to make sure I knew. The nurse's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze softened. "I can't speak to that," she said quietly. "What I can do is make sure you're updated as soon as we know more about your husband. There's a family consult room down the hall. It's a little more private than the waiting room. Would you like to wait there?" Private. A place where, presumably, no one would watch my face when the rest of my life arrived in pieces. "Yes," I said. "Please." As I followed her down the corridor, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Every step away from the reception desk felt like walking deeper into a story I hadn't agreed to be in. My husband was injured. He was somewhere down this hallway, hooked up to machines, his blood pressure numbers flashing on monitors, his heartbeat translated into a line of green light. And he had not been alone. He had chosen to share that fragile space between life and death with someone else. My hand drifted unconsciously to the thin gold band on my finger. For the first time since I'd slipped it on 7 years ago, it felt less like a promise and more like a question. The consult room was smaller than I expected. No windows, no clock, just a narrow table bolted to the floor and four vinyl chairs arranged like a reluctant circle. One wall held a faded poster about hand hygiene. The other was blank, as if even the hospital had decided nothing comforting belonged here. Nurse Daniels gestured for me to sit. "I'll let the trauma team know you're here," she said gently. "Someone will come speak with you shortly." "Thank you," I replied, though gratitude felt abstract at the moment, something I recognized conceptually but couldn't feel. When the door closed, the silence rushed in. I didn't sit right away. I stood there, bag still clutched to my chest, as if sitting would finalize this moment and turn it into something permanent. My thoughts jittered, refusing to line up. Images came instead. Daniel that morning, half asleep, kissing my cheek as he reached for his keys. A text from him an hour later. "Running late, don't wait up." The way I hadn't thought anything of it. I checked my phone now, hands shaking. That text stared back at me, still unread in my mind, suddenly heavier than any other message he'd ever sent. A knock broke the silence. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in green scrubs stepped inside. His hair was graying at the temples, his expression calm in the way of someone accustomed to delivering hard truths. "Mrs. Hart?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Dr. Keene, the attending trauma surgeon." He pulled one of the chairs back and sat opposite me. "Let's talk about your husband." I sat too, my legs feeling distant, unreliable. "Daniel has sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury," Dr. Keene began. "There's a small bleed we're monitoring closely, but at this time, it does not require surgery. He also has internal injuries consistent with a high-speed collision, bruising to several organs, including the spleen. Again, nothing that currently necessitates surgical intervention, but he'll be in the ICU for observation." Alive. ICU. Observation. I clung to those words like driftwood. "Will he wake up?" I asked. "Yes," Dr. Keene said. "He's semi-conscious now, disoriented as expected. We've had him sedated to keep him stable. Once we're confident the bleeding has stopped, we'll begin reducing that." I nodded, gripping the edge of the chair. "Can I see him?" "Soon," he said. "Before that, there's something else we need to address." There it was. "The other patient?" I asked quietly. Dr. Keene folded his hands. "She was in the passenger seat. She's been identified as Laura Bennett. She's conscious and stable. Some fractures, nothing life-threatening. Laura Bennett. A name. Real. Solid. Not some abstract someone else. She told us she and Daniel were in a relationship." The doctor continued carefully. "I needed to make sure you were aware, since these situations can complicate decision-making." Complicate. A neat word for detonation. "I'm his legal next of kin," I said automatically. "I'm his wife." "Yes," Dr. Keene said. "Our records confirm that. Any medical decisions, should they become necessary, would be yours." The weight of that settled on me slowly. Daniel might not be able to speak for himself if things worsened. And yet, just hours ago, he had been driving with another woman, his so-called partner, beside him. I hesitated. Does she know how badly he's hurt? "Yes," the doctor said. She asked repeatedly. "Good. Let her worry," I thought, and was startled by the bitterness of it. Dr. Keene studied my face for a moment, then softened his tone. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart. I know this is a lot. I recommend you take a moment. When you're ready, a nurse can take you to see him." After he left, I stayed seated, staring at my hands in my lap. My wedding ring caught the harsh overhead light again, setting off a small, defiant spark. I wasn't ready. Not to see him like that. Not until I understood what I was walking into. The door opened again, and this time it was not a nurse. She stood hesitantly in the doorway. Blonde, mid-30s maybe, wearing jeans stained with blood and now dried dark at the thigh, her arm in a temporary sling. A thin cut traced her hairline, neatly stitched. Her eyes were red-rimmed but alert. "You must be Emily," she said softly. I stood. "You're Laura." She nodded. I asked if I could speak with you. "I understand if you don't want to." For a long second, I thought about telling her to leave, about closing the door and pretending she was just another stranger in a bad night. But something steadier rose up instead. "Come in," I said, "since you're already here." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The room felt even smaller with both of us in it, the wife and the woman who rode in the passenger seat. I didn't know you were married, Laura said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. He told me you were separated, that things were basically over. Of course he had. And you believed him, I said. It wasn't a question. She flinched. Yes. Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I've been seeing him for 8 months, she continued, voice trembling now. He said you lived together for convenience, that the paperwork just hadn't been done yet. 8 months. I nodded slowly, absorbing the number like another injury report. He lives with me, I said, in our house. He eats dinner there. He complains about work and asks what's for breakfast. Laura sank into one of the chairs, her knees giving way. Oh God, I don't know what he told you, I said evenly. But whatever it wasn't the full truth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I wouldn't have, if I'd known. I'm not here to absolve you, I said, surprising myself with the calm in my voice. But I believe you didn't know. She nodded, pressing her free hand over her mouth. Outside the room, I could hear footsteps, a cart rolling past, life continuing at its own indifferent pace. He kept saying today was important, Laura whispered, that we needed to talk. That's why we were in the car together. Important. The word echoed cruelly. I should go, she said suddenly, standing again. They told me I have a scan scheduled. I'm sorry, Emily. Truly. She hesitated at the door. He loves you, she added weakly. In his way. I didn't answer. After she left, I finally sat back down, my heart pounding not with shock now, but with something colder and clearer. Daniel was alive. But the marriage I thought I'd been in, that was on life support, and I was the one being asked to decide what happened next. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and burned coffee. Every step I took felt like I was walking deeper into someone else's life, one where nothing was stable anymore, not even the floor beneath my feet. The nurse stopped in front of a closed door. Trauma ICU, she said gently. He's awake. You can go in. He's awake. Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they made my stomach tighten. I opened the door slowly. Ethan lay propped against crisp white pillows, his arm in a sling, fresh bruises blooming along his temple and collarbone. Machines hummed softly beside him. For a split second, relief washed over me. He was alive, breathing. Still him. Then I saw her. She sat on the chair beside his bed, leaning forward slightly, hands folded in her lap as if she belonged there. Dark hair, loose sweater, eyes rimmed red from crying. She looked up when I entered, and something flickered across her face. Panic, then calculation. Ethan turned his head toward the door. Our eyes met. I waited for shock, guilt, fear. Instead, what crossed his face was something worse. Resignation. Claire, he said quietly. Not baby. Not thank God you're here. Just my name, worn down to a single syllable, like he'd said it too many times already tonight. I stepped fully into the room. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the moment. Who is she? I asked. My voice startled me with its steadiness. The woman stood abruptly. I should go, she said, already reaching for her bag. No, I said without raising my voice. Stay. Ethan swallowed. His jaw tightened, a familiar tell. He looked between us the way someone looks at 2 exits during a fire. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, he said. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. Funny, I replied. I didn't realize there were so many acceptable ways. Silence stretched. The machines filled it with rhythm and beeps, as if the room itself was waiting. She's Maya, he said finally. She was with me in the car. I turned to her. So, are you the someone else? Maya flinched. I didn't know he was married at first, she said quickly. He told me you were separated. I looked back at Ethan. He didn't correct her. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deep, like a fault line slipping. How long? I asked. He exhaled slowly. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of late meetings. Missed dinners. Phone calls taken outside. A growing distance I'd blamed on stress or myself. And tonight, I pressed. Where were you going? For a weekend trip, Maya said quietly. Upstate. We just crossed the intersection when the truck ran the light. The floor tilted. So you weren't just injured with someone else, I said. You were leaving. Ethan tried to sit up. Claire, please. No, I stepped back, needing air, space, reality. You already used your please on her. The nurse knocked softly and peeked in, sensing the tension. Is everything all right? Yes, I said, though nothing was. We're done here. I turned and walked out before either of them could stop me. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights streaked past like broken promises. My hand shook on the steering wheel, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Tears felt too small for what was unfolding. At home, the house greeted me with quiet familiarity. The couch we picked together, the photo frames on the wall, the faint scent of his shampoo lingering in the hallway. I stood in the living room, suddenly unsure where to put my bag, my body, or my future. My phone buzzed. Please come back. We need to talk. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at the screen. Then I turned the phone face down. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and reached for an overnight bag. My hands moved mechanically, selecting things at random. Pajamas, jeans, a sweater. When I pulled open the bottom drawer, something fell out. His tablet. I frowned. He'd been looking for it all week. I sat on the bed and hesitated just for a second. Then I turned it on. No password. The messages loaded quickly. There were hundreds. Photos I'd never seen. Messages sent late at night. Pet names that weren't mine. Plans. Jokes. Arguments. Apologies. This wasn't a mistake. This was a parallel life. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A voice memo, dated 2 weeks ago. I tapped it. Ethan's voice filled the room, low and urgent. I'm almost done, okay? Once the house sells, I'll have the money. Claire doesn't need to know yet. Just be patient. I froze. The house. The one we lived in. The one that was never technically his. My parents' gift. My name on the deed. Something I'd insisted on, not out of mistrust, but caution. Or so I thought. I listened again. Once everything's finalized, we'll start our life properly. My hands trembled as I set the tablet down. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had been planning financially. Strategically. I slid off the bed and sat on the floor, back against the mattress. My heart pounded, not with grief now, but with something sharper. Clarity. The accident had exposed the truth too early. That was the only mistake he'd made. And now, because of it, I had time. I picked up my phone, not to call him, but to call the lawyer my father had insisted we meet years ago, just in case. The call rang twice. Claire, he answered, is everything okay? No, I said calmly, but it will be. Outside, the house stood silent, still mine, still solid, still standing. Inside, something new had taken root. The truth had demanded to be told, and I was done protecting the man who tried to bury it. Hospitals have a particular way of bending time. Minutes stretch until they feel punitive, then suddenly collapse into moments you can never fully recall later. By the time dawn crept through the narrow windows of the surgical waiting area, I felt as though I'd aged years in a single night. Ethan was still in surgery. No one had told me anything definitive. Not good, not bad, just ongoing. The kind of word doctors use when they don't want to promise you survival or prepare you for death. I sat rigid in the plastic chair, my hands folded so tightly in my lap my fingers had gone numb. Across the room, she sat too, the woman from the car, the one whose name I still did not know. Her knee was bandaged, her jacket folded beside her. She kept glancing at the double doors like she expected someone to emerge and absolve her of something. When her phone buzzed, she flinched. When mine did, I did. Anger surged then, hot grounding. Not the blind kind, but the focused, deliberate fury of someone who sees the truth clearly at last. Can I see him? I asked. The doctor nodded. Briefly. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and quiet devastation. Ethan lay pale against white sheets, bruises blooming across his face. Tubes and wires tethered him in place, stripping him of every shred of control he once held over me. When his eyes opened, relief flickered, then fear. You came, he said hoarsely. Yes, I replied. I did, and for the first time since the phone call, I wasn't trembling. I spoke to Lila. I continued. 6 months, Ethan. His jaw tightened. I was going to tell you, he said weakly. I smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. You already told me, I said, just not with words. He tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. I won't be visiting again, I said calmly. My lawyer will contact yours. And when you're released, you won't be coming home. Silence swallowed us whole. As I turned to leave, he called my name, but whatever he wanted to say was already too late. In the corridor, Lila stood waiting. When she saw my face, she understood. I'm done, she said quietly. With him, fully. For the first time, I believed her. I walked past her without responding. Outside, the sun had fully risen. The world continued, indifferent and relentless. And for the first time since that terrible call, I realized something unexpected. I hadn't lost my husband. I had regained myself. Leaving someone after betrayal isn't dramatic the way movies make it look. There's no music swell, no moment where the sky cracks open and delivers clarity like a reward. There's just movement, quiet, deliberate, irreversible. I didn't go home that morning. Instead, I drove straight to my office, parked without concern for lines or meters, and sat in my car long enough to steady my breathing. My hands were calm now, my thoughts oddly ordered. Shock gives way to logistics faster than people expect. I called my lawyer first. He listened without interruption as I laid it all out. The accident, the other woman, the recording on the tablet, the plan to sell the house. When I finished, there was a pause. You did the right thing by calling immediately, he said. Do not confront him further. Do not explain yourself. And do not return home alone. I won't, I said. What do I need to do now? That question felt powerful in my mouth. Not why did this happen? Not how could he do this? What's next? That was when I understood the shift. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was executing. By noon, I had a plan. Temporary restraining order. Precautionary, not reactive. Financial lockdown. Accounts frozen. Joint access removed. Documentation. Screenshots backed up to 3 locations. Time-stamped and filed. My lawyer moved quickly. Men who plan exits don't like surprises, he said. And your husband was planning an exit. I nodded, remembering Ethan's words in the voice memo. Once the house sells, I'll have the money. He had seen my trust as a delay, not a boundary. That mistake would cost him. The first time he called, I didn't answer. The second time, I didn't either. The third time, I blocked the number entirely. Silence is not cruelty. It is containment. I stayed with my sister that night. Her guest room smelled like lavender and clean sheets. Unfamiliar, but safe. She didn't ask for details when I arrived, just handed me a mug of tea and hugged me until my knees stopped shaking. Stay as long as you need, she said simply. I slept for 4 uninterrupted hours. It felt like waking from anesthesia. News traveled fast. By the next day, mutual friends had started texting. Are you okay? I heard there was an accident. Is it true he wasn't alone? I didn't respond. Not yet. Narratives form themselves when silence refuses to fill gaps prematurely. Ethan tried another angle. He emailed. Subject, please talk to me. Body, I know how bad this looks. But none of this is what you think. The house thing was a misunderstanding. I was tired. I was confused. I made mistakes. I love you. Please let me explain. I read it once, then archived it. People who want control always ask for conversation. Because conversation gives them access. I was done granting access. 3 days later, he was released from the hospital. He went home, to an empty house. The locks had been changed, not vindicatively, but legally. His name remained on nothing that hadn't already been his. A box of his essential items waited on the porch, arranged carefully. A note rested on top. Your belongings are intact. Communication will proceed through counsel. Detached. Polite. Final. I didn't imagine his reaction. I didn't need to. Lila, Laura, Maya, whichever name he'd assigned her, contacted me once. A single message. I didn't know. I walked away. I hope someday you can believe that. I stared at it for a long moment before replying. I believe you wouldn't have stayed. That doesn't make it my responsibility to comfort you. She didn't respond. That was fine. Closures are not reciprocal. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. I returned to my routines with small adjustments, different grocery store, different gym hours, and a new path through the park. Avoidance was not fear, it was preservation. Ethan's side of the world began to erode. Word got around his office. HR launched a formal review. Driving under the influence, ethics concerns, reputational risk. He went on temporary leave. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent. He sent one final message through his attorney requesting a personal conversation. My lawyer's response was short. All communication remains legal. And just like that, the space where manipulation once lived stayed empty. One evening, as I sorted through leftover documents, I found our wedding vows. Written in my handwriting, I choose you, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient. I folded the paper once, then twice, then placed it in the shredder. The machine hummed softly, efficiently. No ceremony, just forward motion. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel healed. What I felt was untethered from a lie. And that, even more than forgiveness, is what freedom actually looks like. Silence has weight. I learned that in the days after Ethan returned home, when no messages came through my phone, when no confrontations erupted, when the calm felt almost staged, people assume quiet means reconciliation is coming, that it's the breath before forgiveness. They are wrong. Silence is where consequences gather. I stayed with my sister for nearly 2 weeks. Long enough for the shock to wear off. Long enough for my nervous system to stop bracing for the sound of his key in the door. Long enough to remember how my thoughts sounded when they weren't constantly rearranging themselves around someone else's moods. On the 15th day, I returned home with an escort. Not because I was afraid of Ethan, because fear gives men like him too much credit. I returned because this was my house too, and I refused to let trauma exile me from my own life. The locksmith finished changing the interior locks while my lawyer stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the hallway as if it were a courtroom aisle. Ethan was not there. He'd been advised, firmly, not to be. The house felt hollow, not lonely, just stripped of illusion. Every shared object looked different now. The couch where he'd insisted on honesty nights. The kitchen island where he'd squeeze my shoulder while lying effortlessly. The hallway mirror where I'd once adjusted his tie before work. Believing intimacy was armor against betrayal. I moved through the rooms without sentiment. Objects don't betray. People do. Ethan broke his silence 3 days later. Not with words, with a filing. He contested the financial separation agreement. It wasn't strong. It wasn't smart. But it was him, a final reach for leverage dressed up as legality. My lawyer wasn't surprised. This is about control, he said over the phone. Not money. Men who lose narrative often try to regain it procedurally. Will it work? I asked. No, but it will delay things. Drain him. Exhaust the illusion that this ends quietly. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then let it be tired. The hearing was scheduled for a month later. In that month, small truths surfaced, uninvited, undeniable. Ethan's temporary leave from work became an official termination. The firm cited reputational risk, ethical concerns, and failure to disclose conflicts of interest. His name was scrubbed cleanly from the website within hours. Friends I hadn't heard from in ages reached out quietly, not to gossip, but to confirm. Is it true? Did he really? I never liked the way he spoke to you. I answered selectively. Not everyone deserves access to clarity. Lila didn't contact me again, but someone else did. Her manager. He left a voicemail, voice unsteady, apologetic. I realize this is deeply inappropriate, he said, but I believe you should know. Ethan filed an HR complaint claiming a consensual workplace relationship that deteriorated after he withdrew emotionally. I closed my eyes, and I asked when we spoke, and it fell apart. Immediately, the timestamps didn't align. He tried to shift accountability. It failed. There it was. Even now, after the accident, after exposure, after loss, he still believed he could reframe reality. Some people never stop auditioning for innocence. The night before the hearing, I slept badly. Not because I fear the outcome, because closure is louder than pain. Pain familiarizes itself. Closure rewrites identity. I woke before dawn, showered, dressed carefully, not to impress, but to anchor. Chose neutral colors, low heels, clean lines. I wasn't attending as a victim. I was attending as a witness to my own ending. The courtroom was small. Ethan sat across from me, thinner now, eyes rimmed red, but there was no shame in his posture, only resentment. That particular kind that forms when entitlement meets resistance. He didn't look at me when I entered. Good. I didn't want recognition, only resolution. His attorney spoke first. Long, meandering arguments about emotional distress, mutual misunderstanding, marital strain. He painted Ethan as flawed but earnest, a man who had lost his way but deserved compassion. When it was my lawyer's turn, he stood calmly, then dismantled the illusion brick by brick. He introduced documented evidence, the recording, the real estate communications, the timeline inconsistencies, the DUI blood test, the misleading separation claim. And finally, he said quietly, "This case is not about heartbreak. It is about deception." Mr. Hale did not drift. He maneuvered. The judge listened without interruption, then looked at Ethan. "Mr. Hale," she said evenly, "do you deny that you planned to liquidate marital assets without the knowledge of your spouse?" Ethan's mouth opened, closed. Then, "I was under emotional stress." The judge nodded once. As many liars are. The ruling came swiftly. His claim dismissed. His countersuit denied. My legal separation upheld without amendment. Ethan's shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in disbelief, as if the world had violated an agreement he thought he'd signed alone. Outside the courtroom, he finally spoke to me. "Are you happy now?" he asked bitterly. I considered him. Not the husband I'd loved. Not the man I trusted. Just a stranger asking a question he didn't deserve the answer to. "I'm honest," I said. "That's more than you ever offered." He flinched. I walked away. The weeks that followed were lighter. Not easy, but lighter. I donated the couch, sold the dining set, repainted the bedroom a color Ethan had always hated. Each act was small, cumulative, restorative. I didn't post cryptic quotes online. I didn't seek allies. I didn't reframe myself publicly. Healing is quiet when it's real. One evening, while walking home under streetlights newly softened by spring, I realized something startling. I no longer rehearsed conversations with Ethan in my head. There were no imagined apologies, no hypothetical defenses. The mental space had emptied. That was when I understood what silence had been doing all along. It wasn't waiting. It was working. I closed my front door, rested my hand on the wood, and stood still. For the first time since the phone call, since the hospital, since the truth, I felt steady, and I knew the next chapter would not involve him at all. The first time I realized my life no longer revolved around Ethan, it wasn't because I felt strong. It was because I forgot him. The realization came on a Tuesday afternoon, unremarkable in every way. I was standing in the produce aisle, holding 2 avocados, arguing internally about ripeness when my phone buzzed. Instinctively, I checked the screen, not with dread, not with rehearsal, but with absent-minded curiosity. It was my mother. I smiled before answering. The smile surprised me. "How are you?" she asked. "Good," I said and meant it. After I hung up, I stood there longer than necessary, avocados still in hand, stunned by the quiet truth settling in my chest. The world had not collapsed after my marriage ended. It hadn't even wobbled much. It had simply continued. And so had I. The paperwork finalized 2 weeks later. No ceremony, no bitterness, just initials and dates. Ethan did not attend the signing in person. His lawyer cited personal strain. The irony was almost generous. When my lawyer slid the final document across the table, I felt no rush of victory, no vindication, just relief, clean and breathable. "You're officially done," he said. I nodded. Done was a powerful word. Leaving the building, I passed Ethan's attorney in the lobby. He hesitated, then spoke. "If it matters," he said carefully, "my client is struggling." I met his gaze without flinching. "It doesn't matter," I said, "but I hope he finds the support he needs." That was the truth. His suffering was no longer my responsibility to observe, solve, or soften. Compassion does not require proximity. I didn't tell many people the divorce was final. No announcement, no celebratory dinner. Instead, I booked a trip. 3 weeks. 1 suitcase. No itinerary beyond the first night's hotel. The decision baffled my sister. "You're not scared?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm curious." Curiosity is what remains when fear no longer governs choice. I crossed cities the way some people cross chapters, unapologetically, without rereading. I drank coffee alone at sidewalk cafes, walked unfamiliar streets, spoke to strangers whose questions held no history. No one knew me as someone's wife. No one expected me to explain what had happened. That anonymity was intoxicating. One evening, sitting by the sea, phone switched off, wine untouched beside me, I realized something subtle but decisive. I wasn't rebuilding. I was arriving. Ethan resurfaced when I least expected him. Not directly, through a letter. Handwritten, mailed. I recognized the careful slant of his handwriting immediately. How he'd always written my name just a little too carefully, as if even ink required performance. I considered not opening it, then did without ceremony. "I owe you an apology." Of course he did. "I understand now how deeply I hurt you. Therapy has helped me see the patterns. I was afraid of aging, of failure, of being ordinary. I made choices that destroyed the one person who believed in me." I read slowly, thoughtfully, not because I was moved, but because I had earned the clarity to evaluate it calmly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I only hope someday you'll remember me as someone who tried, even if I failed. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to do better." The letter ended there. No request, no pressure, no manipulation, at least not overtly. I folded the paper once, then set it aside. Later, I burned it safely over the sink, watching the flame curl the words into ash. Not in anger, in finality. Some chapters do not deserve annotation. Returning home felt different this time. Lighter. The apartment had become mine without negotiation. I noticed details I'd once dismissed. The way lights spilled across the floor in the mornings, the sound of rain against the windows at night. I began filling the space with intention. Books I chose for myself. Music I played without compromise. Silence I no longer fled. One Sunday afternoon, sorting through old files, I found something unexpected. A journal. Not mine. Ethan's. He must have forgotten it in the move. I almost closed it immediately, then paused. Curiosity does not always thirst for answers. It sometimes seeks closure. Inside were unfinished thoughts, aborted plans, lists he never completed, entire pages about trying to be enough and never feeling like he was. Halfway through, a familiar pattern emerged. Every failure externalized. Every insecurity redirected. I closed the journal gently. Some truths are already known. I donated the rest of his belongings that day, quietly, efficiently. Nothing was kept as evidence. I had enough. A month later, I took a new position. Same industry, different structure, no overlap. During the interview, the director asked, "What are you looking for right now?" I didn't hesitate. "Autonomy," I said. She smiled. "Good answer." The job challenged me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not harder, but cleaner. No emotional residue. No need to negotiate identity. Just capability. Just effort. Just growth. One evening, weeks later, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was brief. "This is Lila. I wanted to tell you, I left the firm. I'm starting over somewhere else. I know you owe me nothing. I just wanted to say thank you for not turning me into the villain." I sat with the message for a long time, then sent a single sentence. "We were both running from something. I hope you find what you're looking for." She replied with a heart. I didn't. Not because I was cold, because closure doesn't require punctuation. Life resumed its rhythm. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Better. I laughed more. Ate when I was hungry. Slept without bracing. The echo that Ethan had left behind finally evaporated. And then, one afternoon, standing in line at a bookstore cafe, someone behind me said, "Excuse me, is that the book by Julian Ash?" I turned, smiled. "Yes," I said, "it is." The conversation that followed was easy, unforced, human. And when he asked if I wanted to continue it sometime, I didn't think of Ethan at all. Not once. I said yes. That night, walking home beneath a sky scattered with indifferent stars, I realized the truth that had been waiting beyond all the betrayal, all the shock, all the choices. Some endings don't destroy you. They release you. And what comes next doesn't ask permission from the past. I didn't expect the past to reach for me again. That was the illusion, thinking closure meant immunity. Believing that once something ends, it stops moving entirely. But the truth is quieter and more precise. Endings don't return to hurt you. They return to prove they no longer can. The call came on an ordinary evening. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost let it dissolve in a voicemail like so many things before it. But something, a residue of instinct, not fear, made me answer. Emily, a voice asked. I knew it instantly. Ethan. I closed my eyes once, then opened them. Yes. There was silence on the other end. Long enough that I nearly ended the call. I wasn't sure you would pick up, he said finally. I wasn't sure I would, I replied. Why are you calling? Another pause. He sounded different, less polished, less careful, like someone who had finally run out of versions. I'm not calling to fix anything, he said. I know that's gone. Good. At least one thing had landed. I just needed to say something out loud. Without lawyers. Without defenses. You have 30 seconds, I said calmly. A breath. I lost everything, he said. Not just you. My job. Most friends. Even my brother doesn't speak to me anymore. He let out a hollow laugh. Turns out people don't like being lied to for years. I said nothing. I don't blame you, he continued quickly. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know, I see it now, what I did, who I was. 30 seconds stretched, not because I allowed it, but because he ran out of things that mattered. That's all. I asked. Yes, he said quietly. Then listen carefully, I replied. This time I didn't pause. You didn't lose me because of one mistake. You lost me because you treated my trust like an inconvenience. My voice stayed even precise. And whatever clarity you've reached now, it belongs to you, not to me. There was no defense in his response, only acceptance. I know, he said. I ended the call. No shaking, no aftershock, just silence and peace. The strange thing about emotional finality is how physical it feels. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, not from anxiety but readiness. Light streamed through the window in long, honest bands. I stood barefoot on the floor and realized my chest felt open, unburdened, no weight, no vigilance, no expectation of interruption. I went for a walk without music, letting the city breathe around me. People passed, strangers framed briefly, then gone. Life moved without commentary. For the first time in months, the story stopped narrating itself in my head. At work, I was offered a new responsibility. Lateral, not promotional, but significant. It involved trust, autonomy, visibility. My manager studied my face as she explained it. Only say yes if you're ready, she added. I was. Yes, I said simply. That answer felt earned. Weeks folded into one another. The relationship I'd tentatively begun grew slowly, not because either of us hesitated, but because we both respected pace. There were no dramatic confessions, no urgency dressed up as chemistry, just curiosity, presence, choice. One evening, sitting across from him in a quiet restaurant, I realized something again, something important. I wasn't trying to prove I could trust. I already did, because trust doesn't begin with others. It begins when you stop abandoning yourself. The last thread cut itself finally on a Sunday afternoon. I was sorting old digital files when I found a forgotten voicemail, months old, buried under newer messages. From Ethan. I considered deleting it unread, but something stopped me. Not emotion, completion. I played it. My therapist suggested I do this. His recorded voice said awkwardly that I apologize without expecting response. He exhaled. I'm sorry I erased parts of you. I'm sorry I made you doubt your own seriousness. You deserved certainty. I couldn't give it. The message ended. No plea. No blame. I sat back in my chair and closed the file. That was it. The last echo. The sound that fades when you leave a tunnel. I didn't save the message. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Closure isn't proven by reaction. It's proven by absence. That night, I stood on my balcony watching the city settle into itself, windows lighting up one by one like quiet affirmations. Somewhere beneath that skyline, other lives were breaking, mending, beginning. Mine was simply continuing, without noise, without apology, without him. I slept deeply, dreamless, somewhere between forgetting to check my phone and remembering to breathe fully again. I understood the final truth of it all. Being betrayed didn't define me. Being awake afterward did. And nothing, not a call, not a confession, not regret spoken too late, had the power to drag me backward again. Because the story had already closed, and the life beyond it had begun. There is a quiet moment after survival that no one prepares you for. Not the relief, not the freedom, but the stillness. It arrives when the last explanation has already been given, when the final message has been ignored, when the story no longer needs retelling to make sense of it. It is the moment when life stops asking you to process and simply asks you to live. That moment came for me on a Thursday morning, unremarkable in every external way. I was late, not rushing, simply unhurried. My coffee sat cooling beside me while I stood at the window, watching rain gather its courage before falling. There was no sadness in me, no triumph either, only presence. And that was new. For years, my attention had been outward, tracking moods, anticipating needs, softening truths to preserve harmony. Love, I had once believed, meant adaptability, that if you bent cleanly enough, carefully enough, you could avoid breaking. I knew better now. The fracture wasn't caused by rigidity. It was caused by erosion. I didn't become someone else after Ethan. That misconception amused me when people hinted at it. Coworkers who said I seemed different, acquaintances who said I looked lighter, relatives who suggested the divorce had changed me. It hadn't. It clarified me. Clarity does not announce itself loudly. It disturbs nothing. It only removes what no longer belongs. I learned to notice myself again. The way my shoulders dropped when I felt safe. The way my laughter returned in full, unguarded bursts instead of polite agreement. The ease with which I said no without punishment or justification. These were not skills to be learned. They were instincts restored. One afternoon, months later, I ran into someone who used to see us as a unit. A neighbor from our old life. "Emily," she said warmly. "I heard about the divorce." "I'm sorry." "Thank you," I replied lightly. She hesitated, then added, "I always thought you were the strong one." That old ache flickered briefly, but it passed. "I don't want to be strong anymore," I said. "I want to be honest." She nodded, unsure what to do with that answer. I smiled. That smile wasn't for her. The relationship I'd allowed into my life remained what it was, intentional, calm, unspectacular in the best sense. There were no grand gestures, no urgency, no need to define anything prematurely. It grew because it was chosen daily, not out of fear of loss, but out of recognition. And when I needed space, it was respected. When I spoke plainly, I was heard. This wasn't magic. It was alignment. Ethan did not reappear. Not because I blocked every possible avenue, though I could have, but because there was no opening left to exploit. He sent nothing further. No appearances. No attempts. Some people don't move on angrily. They fade. And fading is not injustice. It is consequence. The house, I eventually sold it. Not in haste. Not as rejection. Simply because it no longer served the version of me that existed now. I downsized thoughtfully. Chose a place with light where I woke naturally, where evenings felt like punctuation rather than obligation. The new space held only what I loved or needed. Nothing was kept just in case. That phrase had lost its authority. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still remembered the night of the call. The words, the confusion, the hospital doors swinging open. But the memory no longer had teeth. It sat where it belonged, behind me, not beneath me. Because the woman who stood frozen with that phone pressed to her ear hadn't known yet that her life was about to become hers again. She thought she was losing something precious. In truth, she was being released. One evening, as I prepared dinner alone, music playing softly in the background, I caught my reflection in the window. Not posed, not guarded, just living. And I understood something that would have mattered to me all along had I known it sooner. Love isn't proven by endurance. It's proven by safety. It doesn't require excuses. It doesn't ask silence of you. It does not coexist with fear. I turned the heat down, poured a glass of wine, and sat. No one expecting anything from me. No one to anticipate or manage. Just the steady comfort of a life that no longer demanded self-erasure to survive. And in that moment, mundane, unremarkable, deeply complete, I realized the full truth of my story. I didn't lose a husband. I lost a narrative that required me to disappear to work. And what replaced it was something quieter, something stronger, a life that did not injure me, a truth that did not ask me to stay silent, a future that arrived not with drama, but with peace.